The world had already forgotten about him before he even disappeared. Back home in Illinois, newspapers printed only brief lines about the war. Clashes continue in Korea. But they never mentioned names, never faces. Yet on a cold night in 1951, Private William Hayes, only 20 years old, vanished from the battlefield and into the shadows of history. He didn't die. He didn't escape. He was captured. And from that moment on, every second of his life became a fight not against bullets, but against silence, starvation, and the terrifying thought that he might never see America again. What no one knew, not his commanders, not his family, was that William Hayes carried with him a secret memory of that camp, a truth so dark it would remain buried for decades. But the story of his capture was only the beginning. The fall into captivity, it started during a midnight ambush. William's unit had been stretched thin, their rifles slick with snow, when the enemy struck like shadows in the dark. Gunfire cracked, men screamed, and chaos swallowed the valley. William fired until his rifle jammed. Hands seized him from behind. He fought, clawing, kicking, but a rifle butt crashed against his skull and the world went black. When he woke, his wrists were bound with frozen rope. He was shoved into a line of prisoners, faces pale, eyes hollow. They stumbled through the snow under the bayonets of their captors. The march seemed endless. Every step stole more warmth from his body. Some men collapsed and never rose again. William whispered prayers through clenched teeth, his breath freezing against his lips. But what awaited them at the end of the march was worse than anything he imagined. The prison camp, was nothing more than a scattering of wooden huts and barbed wire, crouched beneath a mountain ridge. Smoke curled from crude chimneys, carrying the stench of burning straw and sickness. Guards barked orders in harsh tones, shoving the prisoners into a cramped barracks. The air was thick with sweat, frost, and despair. Inside, William saw men who had been there for months, skeletal figures, their uniforms in tatters, eyes sunken and distant. A sergeant leaned close to him and whispered, "Don't give them your name. Don't give them anything. That's how they break you." William nodded, but fear gnawed at him. His name was all he had left of home, and soon they would try to take even that away from him. Hunger and silence days bled into nights. The prisoners received a handful of rice and a cup of weak soup twice a day, barely enough to keep them alive. William's stomach gnawed at itself, his ribs sharp beneath his skin. The cold was worse. At night, frost crept into the barracks, coating blankets with ice. Men huddled together for warmth, whispering memories of home. Chicago streets, southern farms, New York jazz clubs. Anything to remind themselves they were human. But guards punished those whispers. Anyone caught speaking too freely was dragged outside. The others never saw them again. William learned quickly. Survival meant silence. The interrogation. One morning, guards pulled William from the barracks. They dragged him to a small hut, where a single table stood beneath a swinging lantern. A man in a heavy coat sat across from him, eyes sharp as knives. "Name," the man demanded. "Private William Hayes," he whispered. The interrogator leaned closer. "Not enough. Tell us your unit, your strength, your positions." William shook his head. He remembered the sergeant's warning. "Name, rank, serial number." "That's all you get." The man's expression darkened. A guard struck William across the face, the blow splitting his lip. Blood filled his mouth, but he did not speak. The interrogator smiled coldly. "We have time. You will talk." But what they wanted from him was not just information, it was something far more dangerous. Whispers in the dark back in the barracks. William lay awake, his face throbbing. Around him, men whispered in the dark. "They'll break him," one muttered. "No one lasts long," another replied. But one voice, faint and trembling, said something that froze William's blood. "Not everyone here is who they seem." He turned, searching the shadows. "What do you mean?" The man didn't answer. He only stared at William with hollow eyes before turning away. Because inside the camp, not every prisoner was truly a prisoner. The hidden note weeks passed. One night, William found something tucked beneath his straw mat. A scrap of paper written in shaky English. "They watch us. They listen. Some of us are not what we appear. Trust no one." His hands shook as he read the words. Who had left it? A fellow American? A spy? The note raised more questions than answers. And in the silence of the camp, questions were more dangerous than bullets. That night, William couldn't sleep. Every face around him seemed suspicious. Every whisper in the dark carried hidden meaning. He clutched the scrap of paper in his fist, his heart racing, and as the guard's boots echoed outside, he realized the truth. The camp wasn't just a prison. It was a trap, and someone inside wanted him to walk right into it. The cold days, the days in the camp dragged on like an endless winter. Every morning the guards stormed into the barracks, shouting orders, dragging men out for labor or interrogation. William Hayes had lost track of time. Was it weeks? Months? His only measure was the shrinking of his body, ribs pressing against skin, and the deepening shadows under his eyes. He kept the scrap of paper hidden, tucked into the sole of his boot. He read it silently whenever he could, its words clawing at his mind. They watch us. They listen. Some of us are not what we appear. Trust no one, but who had written it? The answer to that question could mean the difference between life and death, the man called Doc. One evening, William noticed an older prisoner tending to a wounded man's leg, wrapping it with strips of torn uniform. They called him Doc, though William doubted he had ever been a real doctor. Still, Doc's hands were steady, his voice calm. "Hold still," Doc murmured to the patient. "Pain means you're still alive." Later, William sat beside him, whispering, "Do you know who left the note?" Doc's eyes flicked toward the guards pacing outside. "Maybe, or maybe I wrote it myself." William's breath caught. "Did you?" Doc gave a tired smile. "If I had, I'd be dead already." The answer gave nothing away, and yet it told William everything. Secrets in this camp were a currency more valuable than food. And soon William would find himself forced to spend it. The interrogations continue. The guards dragged men away in groups. Sometimes they came back broken, mumbling nonsense, their eyes vacant. Sometimes they didn't come back at all. One evening, William was pulled into the interrogation hut again. The same officer sat across from him, his coat buttoned neatly despite the heat of the lantern. "You've lasted longer than most," the officer said in calm, fluent English. "You think you're strong. But strength breaks just as easily as bone." He slid a photograph across the table. William's heart lurched. It was a photo of his mother smiling on the porch of their home in Illinois. "Where did you get this?" William's voice cracked. The officer only smiled. "Tell us what we want and you'll see her again." William gritted his teeth. "Name, rank, serial number." The officer's smile faded. He tapped the table once. Guards dragged William out, blood trickling from his lip. But the photo raised a darker question. How much did they already know about him? The silent trade that night back in the barracks, William sat beside Davis. No, not Davis, he corrected himself. That had been the boy in the last story. Here it was Private Clark, a wiry man from Texas who never seemed to sleep. Clark whispered, "They're trying to break you." "Don't let them." William leaned closer. "Clark, do you trust everyone here?" Clark's eyes narrowed. "Why?" William hesitated, then showed him the corner of the note hidden in his boot. Clark's face tightened. "Burn it. If they find that, you're finished." "But someone wanted me to know," William argued. Clark shook his head. "Or someone wanted you dead." And William had no way of knowing which was true. The Hunger Games food grew scarcer. The prisoners fought over scraps, friendships cracking under the strain of empty stomachs. William caught two men tearing into a frozen potato with bare hands, snarling like animals. At night, the guards offered extra food to anyone willing to talk. A handful of rice for a confession. So for betrayal. William lay awake, clutching his stomach, his mind racing. Could he endure another day without eating? Could anyone? He whispered to himself, "Mom, I won't give in." Not yet. But hunger has a way of turning promises into lies. The whispered confession. One night, as the barracks lay in silence, Doc leaned close to William. "You want to know who left the note?" Doc whispered. William's pulse raced. Yes, Doc's eyes darted toward the shadows. "I can't say. Not here, too many ears. But listen, there are men here who aren't prisoners. They look like us, talk like us, but they work for them. Their job is to break us from the inside." William's mouth went dry. "Who?" Doc's gaze lingered on Clark, who slept only a few feet away. And suddenly William realized his only ally might also be his enemy. The test of loyalty. The next day, Clark pulled William aside during labor duty. "Listen, Hayes, you're strong. Stronger than most. But strength doesn't mean survival. Survival means picking the right side." William froze. "What do you mean?" Clark's eyes bored into him. "When the time comes, you'll have to choose between starving with the rest of them or living with me. He pressed something small into William's hand, a scrap of bread. William stared at it, his stomach twisting with hunger. But every bite of food in this camp came with a price. That night William sat in the dark, the bread hidden in his hand. His stomach ached. His mind screamed at him to eat. But Doc's words echoed in his ears. Some of us are not what we appear. He looked at Clark, who stared back with a calm, knowing smile. If he ate the bread, was he accepting a lifeline or a chain? And in that frozen silence, William realized something terrifying. No matter what he chose, he was already trapped. The bread in his hand, William Hayes sat in the dim light of the barracks, staring at the scrap of bread Clark had pressed into his palm. His stomach clawed at him, demanding he eat it. His body shook with weakness. He hadn't had real food in weeks, and yet he couldn't lift it to his mouth. Clark's calm smile from earlier echoed in his mind. When the time comes, you'll have to choose between starving with the rest of them or living with me. It wasn't just bread. It was an invitation, maybe even a trap, because in that camp, every choice carried a price, sometimes more deadly than hunger itself. The stranger in the shadows that night, William slipped the bread back into his boot instead of eating it. Sleep came in restless fragments. At some point he woke to movement. Someone crouched near his mat. A hand reached for his boot. William's eyes snapped open. "What are you doing?" he hissed. The figure froze. Doc, his face pale, eyes wide. "I had to be sure," Doc whispered. "For you can't trust Clark. If you eat what he gives you, he owns you." William's fists clenched. "So you're the one watching me?" Doc's voice trembled. "No, I'm the one trying to keep you alive." But William couldn't decide which was worse, Clark's gifts or Doc's warnings. The day of cold work, the next morning, guards marched the prisoners into the frozen fields to haul logs. William's body screamed with pain, his stomach empty, his head spinning. Clark worked beside him, speaking low. "Did you eat it?" William shook his head. Clark smirked. "Good. That means you still trust me enough to wait. You'll need more than one scrap to live here. So I can give you that. But not if you listen to Doc." William's throat tightened. He could barely breathe. "Why should I trust you?" Clark leaned closer, his eyes like ice. "Because if you don't, you'll die before spring." But survival wasn't the same as freedom, and William knew it. The hidden deal later that night, Clark cornered William near the latrine. "Listen carefully. The guards want something. A name, a single name. Give it to them and you'll eat every night." William recoiled. "You mean betray one of our own?" Clark's expression never changed. "Call it betrayal if you want. I call it staying alive. What good is honor if you're dead and forgotten in the snow?" William's fists shook. "I'd rather die with honor than live as their dog." Clark's eyes glinted. "We'll see." Because soon William would learn that honor itself could be used as a weapon. A letter in the ashes one evening. While gathering wood for the barrack stove, William noticed something in the ashes, a charred scrap of paper. He pulled it free, brushing away soot. Words faintly remained. "They will ask about the bridge. Don't answer." His pulse raced. A hidden message burned to destroy it, but not completely gone. He tucked it into his jacket, mind spinning. What bridge? Why was it important? And who had tried to destroy the warning? Because buried in the ashes of that camp was a truth the enemy would kill to keep hidden. The silent punishment. That night, guards dragged a prisoner into the yard. They accused him of stealing food. William recognized him, a boy barely 18. The guards beat him in front of everyone. His screams cut through the cold air. Clark stood silent. Doc turned away, tears in his eyes. William's stomach churned. He wanted to shout, to stop it, but he stayed frozen. He had no power. When the boy collapsed, unmoving, the guards left his body in the snow as a warning. William stared at the lifeless figure and whispered to himself, "That could be me tomorrow." The breaking point days later, William's hunger finally drove him to pull the bread from his boot. He stared at it, trembling. His body screamed at him to eat, but before he could, Doc's hand closed over his wrist. "Don't, it's poisoned." William froze. "What?" Doc's eyes burned. "That's how they turn men. They give food laced with something, drugs maybe. Makes you weak, makes you compliant. Haven't you noticed how some men go blank after eating what Clark gives them?" William's mind reeled. Was it true? Or was Doc lying to keep him away from Clark? In a world built on lies, how could William tell which truth would kill him? Clark's smile. The next day, William confronted Clark. "What's in the food you give them?" Clark laughed softly. "Bread, rice, soup. What do you think keeps me strong while the rest waste away?" William's jaw tightened. "Doc says it's poisoned." Clark leaned close, whispering in his ear. "And you believe him over me? I'm the one feeding you, Hayes. He's the one keeping you starving. Think about that." William's stomach twisted with rage. He wanted to strike Clark, but the guard's eyes were everywhere. That night, William lay awake, the charred note hidden in his jacket. The bread clutched in his fist, two choices pressed against him like knives. Eat and risk becoming a puppet. Starve and risk becoming a corpse. And as snow drifted through the cracks in the barracks roof, he realized the cruel truth. In this camp, survival wasn't about strength. It was about deciding which kind of death to choose. The choice in the dark, the bread lay heavy in William Hayes's fist, his mind tearing itself apart. Every nerve in his body screamed to eat it, to silence the gnawing hunger. But Doc's warning echoed, "It's poisoned." That's how they break you. Across the barracks, Clark watched him with that same calm, knowing smile. His eyes glimmered in the darkness, as though he already knew which choice William would make. William's hand shook. He couldn't trust Clark, he couldn't trust Doc. In truth, he couldn't trust anyone, because in that camp, trust was the deadliest weapon of all. The escape plan the next morning, Doc approached William while guards barked orders outside. "Hayes," he whispered, "there's a way out." William's eyes widened. "Escape?" Doc nodded. "The bridge, the one they keep asking about in interrogations. It's a supply route. If we can reach it, we have a chance." William's pulse quickened. The burned note in his jacket suddenly made sense. "They will ask about the bridge." "Don't answer." "Why tell me?" William asked. "Because you're strong enough to make it, strong enough to remember." But strength wasn't the only thing survival demanded. Clark's temptation that evening, Clark caught William alone. "I know what Doc told you," he murmured. "About escape, about the bridge." William stiffened. "How?" Clark smirked. "Because I'm the one who told him." William's heart sank. "Why?" Clark leaned closer. "Because there is no escape. The bridge is bait. They let men think they can reach it, then cut them down in the snow. Dozens have tried. None returned." William's chest tightened. "Then why tell us?" Clark's voice dropped to a whisper. "To see who's stupid enough to try." And suddenly, William realized, no matter which man he believed, death waited on both paths. The broken prisoner that night, a prisoner who had been beaten for days, stumbled back into the barracks. His eyes were vacant, his body limp. He muttered nonsense, fragments of words. Bridge, river, home. William watched in horror. Doc tried to comfort the man, but he pushed away, screaming, then collapsed dead on the floor. The guards dragged the body out without a word. William whispered, "That'll be me soon." Doc shook his head. "Not if we move first." The attempt snow fell thick the following night, masking footsteps. Doc motioned for William to follow. A handful of prisoners crept through the shadows, hearts pounding, breaths frozen in the air. They slipped past the outer fence, crawling on their bellies, every creak of the wire echoing in their skulls. The world was silent except for the crunch of snow and the beat of their hearts. Ahead, faint in the darkness, stood the bridge. Wooden beams stretched across a frozen river, guarded only by silence. William's chest swelled with hope. Maybe, just maybe, but hope in that camp was the cruelest lie of all. The trapper spotlight snapped on. Machine guns erupted. Bullets tore through the snow, cutting men down in sprays of crimson. Screams echoed into the night. William dove behind a snowbank, heart slamming, breath ragged. He saw Doc fall, blood staining the ice. Clark's words roared in his ears. "The bridge is bait!" William crawled through the chaos, dragging himself toward the trees. A bullet ripped past his shoulder. Another split the earth beside his face. All around him, men fell. The night was nothing but fire, blood, and silence. The capture again. William didn't make it far. A rifle butt slammed into his back, forcing him into the snow. Guards swarmed him, shouting, dragging him to his feet. The bridge loomed behind him, littered with bodies. Doc was gone. The others, too. Back in the camp, Clark greeted him with the same calm smile. "I warned you," he said softly. William's rage boiled, but he had no strength left to fight. He collapsed into the straw, broken in body and spirit. But even broken men can leave behind something unbreakable. Days later, William found a scrap of paper hidden under his blanket. Doc's handwriting, shaky but clear. "If I don't make it, you must tell them. Tell them what happened here. Tell them the bridge was a lie. Tell them we were not forgotten." William's throat tightened. He pulled a stub of pencil from the floor and began to write his own words beside Doc's. "If anyone finds this, know that I tried. My name is Private William Hayes. I was 20 years old. I loved my home, my family, my country. Don't let my voice die here. Don't let us vanish into the snow." His hand shook as he pressed the paper flat, hiding it deep inside the wall of the barracks. Epilogue. Years later, decades passed. Long after the war ended, after treaties were signed and soldiers returned, workers repairing the remains of a camp found something tucked into the rotting wood of a collapsed barracks, a scrap of paper, faded, torn, but still legible. It bore two names, two voices, two truths: Doc's warning, William's plea. The world would never know exactly how William Hayes died. But they knew this: he had lived, he had fought, and he had left his story behind. And sometimes that is the only victory a prisoner can win. Everyone thought the Korean War was forgotten, but in a letter, in a single scrap of paper hidden in the walls of a prison, a soldier's voice still cried out. And the question that remains is simple: how many more voices are still waiting to be found? If William Hayes' story shook you, don't let his voice be lost again. Subscribe to the Soldier's Journal for more untold stories of the Korean War. Like this video to keep their memories alive, and share it so others never forget the prisoners who never made it home. Because history isn't just about battles, it's about voices. Voices that still speak even from the silence of forgotten camps.